Valguero Ascended finally dropped, and I've gone through the map for the past 7 hours trying to find every change that I could notice that wasn't super minor. In this video, I'll cover 40 pretty notable new features the map offers, and I'll also share my general thoughts on the remaster because I like doing that in these videos for a couple of minutes, but I'll get to that after the list. If you appreciate me pulling all-nighters every time this game releases a map so you can get the videos as fast as possible, please consider subscribing to the channel to help me reach 30,000 by the end of the year. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks! The Chalk Hills had a couple of really nice changes to it. The most notable one for me at least was that the area is just way more lush now. It's a lot more of a dark green, there's a lot more foliage, there's a lot more stuff spawning in general, there's a lot more grass, there's a lot more creatures. It just feels significantly more alive than the Ark Survival Evolved's counterpart. They've also boosted the resource density in this area, which is insane because it was already really good to farm here in Ark Survival Evolved, so building in the Chalk Hills will be a great idea. They've also added a new ruins area in the Chalk Hills with 2 cool looking golden statues. It's not super relevant to gameplay, but they've added a couple of these pre-built structures that I think are really cool and add to the map. They've also added a lot more Aberration themed purple aesthetic to the map, especially in the Chalk Hills where you can see there's a cave here that just looks really cool now. And there's also a little river area where you can go around and there's a bunch of purple crystals all over the place. The Chalk Hills is a little bit monotone usually, so having a little bit of extra color on it is a cool thing. They went with this crystal aesthetic a lot around the map, but I'll talk about that way more later in the video. But I figured I'd at least mention it now while we're talking about the Chalk Hills. Speaking of the Aberration theme, let's talk about the biggest changes they made to the map, which are in the Aberration zone. So they really took a lot of time for the Aberration zone to make it look much better and to make the lighting so much better. It's much easier to see down here even if you don't gamma up. The crystals all around the area make everything look really cool, and this is most notable at the entrances, which look fantastic. If anything, these might be a little bit too bright, but I'd rather it be a little too bright than too dark. One more aesthetic thing before I get into actual gameplay stuff, they added a whirlpool entrance to the Aberration zone as well in the forest. This area looks really awesome. I will say that you should be pretty careful when you're going down here. The descent is pretty steep, and the cutoff for you being able to use a flyer might be in the middle of the air, so you might just get dismounted as you're on top of a giant drop-off. So be a little bit careful, but this is cool. The first really nice quality of life improvement they made to the Aberration zone was adding so many more green and blue gems in the underground area. This makes farming for the Aberration items way more convenient, and it also means you don't need to travel as far through the Aberration zone, which is nice because it can be annoying to go down there without a flyer. On top of overhauling the entire lighting and how many gems are spawning in the underground Aberration zone, they also completely fixed the red zone portion. The red zone portion of Aberration on Valguero was honestly the most complained about thing by players that played the map. People felt like, and I agree with all these opinions, that there wasn't enough Aberration creatures spawning, and that the most cool Aberration creatures weren't spawning, and the other complaint was that the drops down here were really terrible for how out of the way they were. Luckily, they focused a ton of energy on fixing this area and making it so much more playable and so much more worth visiting. Let's go through all the changes they made. Firstly, in terms of resources, this red zone contains a substantial amount of Aberration's polymer flowers, red gems, and collectible black pearls, just like the Aberration red zone where you can go down there and pick them up. All 3 of these resources are really valuable to farm in bulk, and the trade-off of it being in a pretty dangerous area, being the red zone, makes it so you can't get these resources earlier in progression, but it does make it so you can get these resources very conveniently in the late game. The most notable change with the red zone that everybody's talking about, of course, is that there are now rock drakes. There's also a rock drake trench. You can get rock drake eggs. You can use them on this map. I don't want to burst your bubble. I'm not sure how good rock drakes actually will be on Valguero, to be honest. I don't know if they're really designed for a map like this, but the ability to use them is awesome. And I will say that there's absolutely at least one use case for them, which I'll get into in a second. On top of adding rock drakes, of course, they have to add Nameless to the map. The Nameless only spawn in this red zone area of the map, but you do need them, of course, to raise the rock drakes because you need Nameless venom for the rock drakes. From what I've seen, not as many Nameless are spawning as other maps like, for example, Aberration, which is nice, but they are Nameless, so, you know, that sucks. One thing that I was actually surprised about, on top of the regular Reaper Kings and the Nameless spawning, is there's actually Reaper Queens as well, which is really cool. Reaper Queens are what you need to actually get your own tamed Reapers, so Valguero now has the ability to get you tamed Reapers. Actually getting the Reaper Queen to impregnate you is going to be really chaotic because I've only seen them spawn in the bottom of the Rock Drake Trench, which is literally the lowest point on the map, where the most chaotic, strong Aberration creatures reside. But for what it's worth, it is taming a Reaper, so it's probably worth it. The last and honestly maybe best change they made to this entire Aberration zone on the map is changing how the drop tables are. The old drop tables for the Aberration zone on Valguero were horrible. It was super out of the way to go farm them. It wasn't very dangerous, but yet again, just really inconvenient, and the stuff you got from farming them was horrible. So for that reason, one of the first things I checked with Valguero Ascended was these drops. I opened 9 different crates during my testing to see if these crates really were better or if I just got lucky, and I got 3 Ascendant saddles, 2 Mastercraft BPs, and then I got some electronics and some other relatively useful items. Point is, the drops are way better now, and they're absolutely worth farming. In my opinion, the best way to farm these is going to be by using a rock drake. They're fast, they can go down here, you can avoid all the threats down here because you can just climb on walls, and plus, this gives you an excuse to use rock drakes for something besides being cool, so that's great. Moving on from the Aberration side of the map, let's talk about the creatures. The first new creature is the Megaraptor. The Megaraptor is free, and the best way I could describe it is sort of a solo hunter style creature. It's really fast, can jump really high, and has 3 pretty cool abilities with a plethora of buffs that come with these abilities. The Megaraptor is equipped with 3 abilities called Hunt, Camo, and Pounce, and it also gets buffs that lean into this playstyle that these abilities benefit for. One of its buffs is Invigoration, which gives you a shield when a recently damaged target dies. One is called Isolator, which basically gives you an attack bonus when you have an isolated enemy that you're attacking and there's nothing nearby to protect it. Let's say, for example, in this clip, I'm fighting this Carbonemus. If there's no other Carbonemus nearby, I'm going to get the Isolator buff and deal much more damage to this Carbonemus because there's no Carbonemus nearby to help it. It also is equipped with a Solitary Hunter buff, which means you deal more damage and take less damage when there's no other Megaraptors nearby. The Hunt, Camo, and Pounce all can be used pretty okay. The Pounce is only used when you're jumping and can give you a really good movement speed boost. And the other 2 abilities are more oriented towards picking out a target and being stealth based. But I'm going to kind of save these abilities and talk more about the Megaraptor tomorrow in my top 10 Valguero creatures video. I don't want this video running on too long, and there is a more interesting creature that I'd rather talk about, which is the next talking point. The Elder Claw is the other creature they released for Valguero Ascended, and it's part of the Lost Colony Expansion Pass bundle, which is $30, but you do get all those items from Ragnarok, all those Ragnarok Lost Colony creatures, and Lost Colony when it releases, so it's not bad. The Elder Claw is really interesting because it's actually a new support creature, which we haven't gotten a new one of in a long time. It comes with a shield, it comes with a CC that can root enemies in place, and it comes with a totem that can be placed to buff everything in a nearby area. From my testing, this seems like a much stronger and much higher potential creature while being more interesting than the Megaraptor, and I'll cover it in much more detail tomorrow as well. It's definitely cooler out of the 2 additions they've added, and I'm really excited to try this thing out in more detail, so definitely stay tuned for that. One random little area I thought was really cool on the map was this cool looking tree here with all these crystals around it in this really aesthetic area. I just figured I'd bring it up because I thought it looked really nice, but unfortunately for them, they forgot to make the tree unbreakable, so I immediately ruined the entire aesthetic of the area. I don't know what brought me to try to break the tree, maybe the fact that it's 6 AM and I'm still playing Ark, but whatever the reason is, I've completely ruined the entire aesthetic of the area. Hopefully it grows back. For number 15 and 16, I'm just going to put it all in one section here. The Ice and Chalk Golem are back with new designs. They look slightly different than they did in Ark Evolved. I might have been stretching it by calling it a new design, but they are updated designs. They've also changed the spawn frequency of these 2 and made them less common, at least from what I've seen. I've been flying around the map and I've barely seen any of either of these. When in Ark Survival Evolved, they were pretty easy to find. While we're still on the topic of creatures, there's also pretty much every single ASA creature that's been brought over. This includes stuff like Garuga's creatures, the Fantastic Tames, the Lost Colony Expansion Tames, and some of the other ASA Tames like the Gigantoraptor, Phaslosuchus. Just basically everything they've added that you would expect them to bring into new maps, they did bring in, so it makes Valguero even more fun. They also made a huge update. This isn't really Valguero specifically related, but it does impact the new map, where a lot of new wild creatures can actually have babies spawn with them now. On screen now you can see the list of creatures that can now have babies with them in the wild. I personally haven't seen many of these creatures with that, but they posted it with the patch notes, so this is a thing in the game now. I'm glad they made this change. I feel like they've been teasing the RG baby thing for like 2 years now, so it just makes sense they finally have baby flyers on the map. Obviously babies change how the game is played because you can kill the parent and then get the baby much easier than going through the whole taming process, so I think it's interesting they added it for more creatures. Another really nice quality of life thing they added was the giant underwater silica pearl clams from Astraeus. They put these in the rivers on this map, which makes them much more accessible than if they were in the deep underwater sections because you can actually just go down, farm a couple, and then go back for air. On the downside, these currently aren't farmable. At least from my testing, I couldn't farm them by hand or with an angler, but I do assume they are meant to be farmable. These have the exact same model as the ones on Astraeus, and the ones on Astraeus were farmed for silica pearls, and this would be a really nice way to farm silica pearls on this map. One of the other biomes they changed drastically was the tundra biome, and in my opinion, this might be the most drastic change they made to any biome on the map, at least in terms of appearance. They just brightened it up a lot, made it a lot more of a light orange as opposed to that old sort of dark, brutish orange. And I think it just stands out a lot, especially in contrast with the snow that's in parts of the biome. Nothing super crazy here, but I thought it was a nice change. Another area I thought they made look way better was the Wyvern Trench. They added more of that purple crystal I was talking about earlier, which sort of just made it look more interesting. They also just made the rest of the Wyvern Trench look better even without that purple crystal, and they also added pyromanes to the bottom of the trench. Yet again, I'm not really sure why they keep adding pyromanes specifically to the bottom of Wyvern Trenches. Taming them when they're down there is going to be a really annoying process. Before I get into more quality of life stuff they did and the final really huge change they made to the map, I'm going to go through a couple more minor details they added that I thought were pretty cool. They added a pre-built structure to the south of the tundra biome, which looks really cool. It goes into the side of this mountain, which I also thought was a nice touch. Yet again, I just really like some of these pre-built structures they add to the map. It sort of makes you feel like somebody lived here before you. There's also a new walled-in area with a house on the north side of the tundra. There's lots of empty space inside here, so you could probably build a pretty good PvE base. There's also some sick statues of dudes riding bears wielding a sword, and a couple of pretty cool direwolf statues too. They added a fort in the middle of the map right at the center of the giant river, which looks sick. This sort of connects these two mini islands also, which I thought was awesome. There's also a ruins area off to the west of the chalk hills in the center of the small lake. And my favorite pre-built structure on the map is this Colosseum here. There's also a pretty intricate pathway going from the side of the mountain up to this structure, so it's very well thought out and it looks awesome. One of my favorite changes in the entire map was how they overhauled the waterfall cave in the northwest side of the map. It looks absolutely incredible now, and this used to be one of my favorite spots on the map before, and it's even cooler now. In terms of the deep underwater area, they added a lot more resources like extra crystal and extra metal. And they also threw in way more jellyfish spawns while they were going to town with increasing the rates of things down here, so the jellyfish didn't get left out. I've also noticed a lot of Zifactinus and Archelon spawning down here, which obviously weren't in ASE either, so that's another change. On top of increasing the resource spawns underwater, they also massively increased how many beaver dams are spawning on the map. I've noticed that they increased the amount of beaver dams, especially in the coordinates you see on screen now, and most notably, there's way more giant beaver dams than there were before. There are 3 spots you can go for beaver dams on this map pretty effectively, and I've noticed that there's an increase in beaver dams spawning at all 3, but the one I'm showing you now is where the most increases happen in my opinion. The way I tested this was kind of ballparking based on how many beaver dams I remember used to be in those spots in ASC, and then I cycled the beaver dams a couple of times and sped up the game to see how many would respawn. It seems like there's about 2 times the amount of beaver dams in this area. The area in the tundra has similar amount of beaver dams as before, and that one lake on the west side of the map has a couple more beaver dams than usual, but not nearly as much of an increase as this spot. Going to even more of a broad scale than just underwater resources or beaver dams, I've noticed resource distribution is a lot better on Valguero Ascended than it was on Evolved. On Evolved, one thing I had a problem with was it felt like a lot of base spots on the map were so far away from so many resources. But they've sort of tackled this problem by spreading out resources, maybe not a huge amount of them, but a decent amount in a lot of different spots on the map that there weren't resources before. Random hills, random rocks, hell, even in the middle of plains sometimes. They just throw a couple of metal nodes, a couple crystal nodes, maybe 1 or 2 obsidian nodes, and that's all you really need to be able to operate a base nearby. It's not like it was impossible to base in certain spots on the map, but having to fly across a large portion of a huge map like Valguero could take a lot of time and it was a bit tedious. They also improved other resource quantities like organic polymer by a mile and silica pearls. Yet again, hopefully they're going to fix those clams. So all these tweaks just make the map nicer to play in general. The resource thing not being a problem at all is very convenient. Another change they made with this map that was a little bit weird at the start, but I kind of got used to it, was how they made all the crystal blue on the map, and they made crystal spawn absolutely everywhere the eye can see. I'm almost certain Nakatis had to have watched Breaking Bad between his time making Astraeus and now, because the blue crystal literally has to be his favorite thing in the world based on how damn much of it there is on this map. Since we're on the topic of crystals, they also use those purple Aberration style crystals like I mentioned earlier in the video around the map for a lot of different designs. I thought it was a pretty cool touch. I'm not sure why they decided to go down this purple crystal route, but giving Valguero more of an identity than just having the chalk hills and having the Deinonychus was a smart move. They also used some other colored crystals too, like orangish yellow ones in the side of a couple of the grasslands mountains. I'm not really sure if there's some symbolism to it, if there's some meaning to it. Yet again, the map's been out for almost 8 hours now. I'm just reporting what I'm seeing. They made minor updates to every single cave on the map, but the 2 main cave changes I wanted to talk about were the Artifact of the Cunning and the Spider Cave. Firstly, the Artifact of the Cunning cave has more obsidian, more crystal, and more creature spawns now than in Ark Evolved, and they also did a very solid visual overhaul here. It looks a lot better than ASE. The Spider Cave changes were more substantial in my opinion. They added the Aberration organic polymer flowers around the outside of the entrance to the cave and in the pathway going inside of the cave. The cave itself seems pretty similar. I think the creature spawns are a little bit lower than they were in ASE, making the cave a bit easier once you get inside past the Broodmother. But that could have just been because I was flying around the map pretty quickly. It could be normal. But adding another spot where you can farm organic polymer flowers makes the dire bear, first of all, a must-tame creature on the map. It's so good at farming these flowers, and the amount of polymer you can get is going to be ridiculous on this map now. And secondly, it's just nice not having to go deep in the Aberration zone every time you want to farm the flowers. Back to less gameplay related stuff, there's a Zivectinus corpse in the center of a ring of rocks. I get annoyed at dealing with these things sometimes when I'm playing the game, but I do not have this level of hate for the Zivectinus. I just thought it was too funny not to include though. And I also noticed this statue just looks like a dude for some reason, so I figured I'd include that too because it looks kind of funny. The reason I include stuff like this is because there's so many small things like this random statue just holding up a cliff that they put effort into on the map. This map remaster, in my opinion, was just a really good remaster. They did it really smart because they only changed the stuff they actually needed to change, and they let the excellent map from ASC not change besides the stuff that actually had to get tweaked. The main two issues were the Aberration zone lacking the Aberration tames that people actually wanted, and the boss fight being horrible, and they changed both of those two things. With that being said, I probably missed at least something in this video when I'm going through the map. It's really hard to see every single corner of the map and not miss at least some smaller or even some major details. So if there's something I missed that you've noticed when you're playing the game, please leave it in a comment. I'm gonna have a pinned comment with all the stuff I missed about the map. Without further ado though, let's talk about the boss. The boss that's replacing the Megapithecus Dragon and Manticore arena is called Grendel. Grendel is basically a giant Mega Raptor that summons Deinonychus as a mini support and Vultures as a mini support. On top of that, it's in the most ominous arena in the entire history of Ark bosses. Unless you turn the fog off, it is pretty hard to see. I actually didn't turn it off for most of this clip just because I think it looks so cool with the fog on. There's also additional abilities for it where it can jump in the air and cloak itself and then dive bomb back down onto you. The boss is incredibly fast, so it can sprint right up to you and attack you from basically anywhere in the arena in a few seconds. And there's also torches in the arena that you can use to remove the fog, and that may have other fighting implications, but I haven't found other reasons to do the torch stuff yet. I will update that in my tips and tricks video though. The entire arena is amazing though. The boss fight is gonna be really tough because the vultures will kill you off the back of your mount and the Deinonychus will bleed your creatures. I have been cooking up a strat in my head that I think will work really well for this boss fight, but I have to do a lot more testing on this boss before I want to share any tips and tricks to the public with it. I don't really want to lead anybody astray and get them killed by a giant raptor. That does not sound like a fun fate. Just know this boss fight is going to be a lot harder than the old one. It's going to be a lot more fun, and the arena is probably my favorite boss arena in the entire game now. I mean, you literally go in and there's a T-Rex hanging there dead. How cool is that? Great time to release this during October, during the Halloween month. Super, super cool concept for a boss. I don't know if I love the Megaraptor as an actual creature, but the boss fighting version of it is great. Grendel also drops a trophy and a flag, both of which looking pretty cool. I think the flag is awesome and the trophy is okay. And my 40th and final feature is that the map's really well optimized. I know this shouldn't be a feature, but we are playing Ark, and the reality is a lot of maps in this game are horribly optimized. This is the best optimized map I've played on the game, maybe besides Astraeos. Those two are far and away the most optimized maps in Ark Survival Ascended though, so whatever Nakatis is doing on the maps he works on, he needs to do that for every single map that Ark releases for the rest of time. There is more I didn't mention about the map, but the map is amazing, so I'd highly recommend you go and try it out for yourself if you haven't yet. Comment below saying what I missed on this list. I'm sure there's a lot. I made this off around 7 hours of map testing and flying around, so I'm sure there's stuff I didn't cover, but I hope I got the main stuff. With that being said, hopefully this was helpful in getting you at least a little bit more hyped for the map, or just learning about what changes happened if you played the old game. Thank you to my members for supporting the channel, and if you guys enjoyed this, check out my video linked on screen now where I rank the 15 best DLC creatures in Ark Ascended. A lot of those are on this map, so it could be useful to you. I'll see you there. Peace!